Have you ever met someone who seemed perfect, who made you feel seen, desired, and alive, only to vanish without explanation? You're left scrolling their messages, replaying every word, wondering what went wrong. What if I told you it's not about you, that their disappearance isn't a reflection of your worth, but a signal of something deeper, something they're afraid to face about themselves? Today, I'm revealing the real reason people act interested, then pull away, and why understanding this truth can save you heartache and put your power back in your hands. It feels real because in that moment, it is real. The laughter, the long conversations, the way they look at you like you're the only person in the room, none of that is imagined. They show up curious, attentive, emotionally available enough to make you believe something meaningful is unfolding. And that's exactly why it's so confusing when they disappear, because how could something that felt that genuine lead to nothing? The truth is, interest and intention are not the same thing. Someone can be deeply interested in how you make them feel without having any intention of building something lasting with you. Interest lives in the present. It feeds on chemistry, validation, excitement, and novelty. Intention, on the other hand, requires foresight. It asks someone to consider responsibility, consistency, and the willingness to show up even when the spark settles into something steadier and more real. Many people are emotionally fluent in the moment, but emotionally uncommitted in the long term. They know how to connect, flirt, open up just enough to create intimacy, but not enough to sustain it. They lean into the relationship when it feels light and affirming, yet retreat the moment it asks for clarity, direction, or effort, not because you did anything wrong, but because effort exposes who they actually are and what they're capable of giving. What makes this especially painful is that their behavior feels like a promise, even when no promise was ever made. The consistency at the beginning tricks your nervous system into relaxing. You start to imagine a future not because you're desperate, but because their actions invite you to. And when they vanish, it feels like the rug has been pulled out from under you. You're left questioning yourself, replaying conversations, wondering where the shift happened. But the shift didn't happen because you became less interesting. It happened because the relationship crossed an invisible line, from something that felt good to something that required intention. For someone who isn't ready, that line triggers fear. Fear of expectations, fear of being needed, fear of losing the freedom to come and go as they please. Here's the part most people miss. Someone can care about you and still not choose you. They can enjoy you deeply and still walk away the moment choosing you asks them to grow. That doesn't make you naive. It makes you human. The mistake isn't believing their interest. It's assuming interest equals commitment. Real commitment doesn't announce itself with intense beginnings. It reveals itself through consistency, clarity, and calm. It doesn't leave you guessing or waiting. It doesn't make you feel like you have to earn the right to be chosen. When someone has intention, they don't disappear when things get real. They lean in. And once you understand this difference, you stop chasing people who only know how to want you in the moment. You start choosing those who know how to stay. When someone disappears just as things begin to feel steady, your mind immediately turns inward. You replay every message, every moment, every word you said, searching for the mistake that must have caused it. Because surely if they pulled away, it must mean you asked for too much, felt too much, or somehow revealed a flaw that made them change their mind. That assumption feels natural, but it's also deeply misleading. In reality, disappearing is far more often about their emotional capacity than your worth. Avoidant people don't run because connection is wrong. They run because connection is powerful. When consistency starts to form, when feelings deepen, routines settle, and expectations quietly appear, it triggers an internal alarm. What you experience as closeness, they experience as pressure. Not because you're demanding it, but because closeness requires presence, and presence requires vulnerability. Avoidant behavior isn't loud. It doesn't usually come with dramatic endings or honest explanations. It comes as delays, distance, and silence. These are not random acts, they are coping mechanisms. Pulling away gives them relief. It restores a sense of control when intimacy begins to feel like something they might lose themselves in or be responsible for. This is why the silence feels so personal. You were leaning in and suddenly you're alone in the space you were building together. But the truth is, the same closeness that made you feel safe made them feel exposed. Your emotional availability wasn't a burden. It was a mirror showing them the depth they're not ready to meet. What's important to understand is that avoidant People can genuinely like you. They can feel connected, attracted, even emotionally stirred by you. The disappearance isn't proof that those feelings were fake. It's proof that their ability to sustain emotional closeness is limited. When reality starts to replace fantasy, they retreat to protect themselves from feelings they don't know how to regulate. This is where self-blame quietly creeps in. You tell yourself that if you'd been more distant, less expressive, or more mysterious, they might have stayed. But shrinking yourself to match someone else's emotional ceiling doesn't create connection. It creates imbalance. You end up managing their fears while abandoning your own needs. The hardest part is accepting that you can't love someone into readiness. No amount of patience, understanding, or emotional generosity can turn avoidance into availability. Their growth has to come from within, and until it does, their silence will always feel safer to them than showing up fully. When you stop interpreting their disappearance as a verdict on your value, something shifts. You begin to see it as information, not rejection. Information about what they can give. Information about what they can't. And clarity, even when it hurts, is kinder than staying in a connection that requires you to constantly question your worth. The real power comes when you choose not to chase what retreats. You choose consistency over chemistry, presence over potential, and emotional safety over uncertainty. Because someone who is ready won't disappear when things get real. They'll stay, communicate, and grow alongside you. There's a pattern you've probably felt more than once. The person is attentive, exciting, and magnetic at first, but the moment things start asking for commitment, they vanish. It's like the thrill of possibility is enough to keep them interested, but the reality of responsibility is too heavy to carry. This isn't a reflection on you, it's a reflection on how some people engage with relationships. They love the fantasy, but they aren't equipped for the follow-through. The fantasy is intoxicating. It's easy to fall for someone who seems fully present in the moments that matter most to them. Texts that make you smile, conversations that leave your heart racing, laughter that feels like intimacy. In those moments, you feel seen, desired, and alive. And the truth is, they genuinely enjoy creating those moments. They enjoy the attention, the connection, the way it makes them feel alive in your presence. But the difference between fantasy and reality is subtle, yet profound. Fantasy doesn't ask for consistency. Fantasy doesn't ask for compromise, sacrifice, or the emotional labor that real connection requires. Reality does. Responsibility is what separates a fleeting attraction from a meaningful relationship. It's showing up not just when it's fun, but also when it's inconvenient. It's being emotionally available even when life is chaotic, and making choices that reinforce trust and security. For someone who is only drawn to the excitement of connection, responsibility feels restrictive. It's a sign that the relationship is no longer just thrilling. It's real, and real relationships require effort. And effort is exactly what they are unwilling to give. This is why you see people fade just as things deepen. The initial rush, the texting, the flirting, the quick electric chemistry is effortless. But once the relationship requires planning, patience, emotional availability, or commitment, suddenly they seem to disappear. Not because they don't care, not because they don't feel something, but because the responsibility of consistent presence clashes with their desire to stay free from accountability. It's easy to blame yourself in these moments, to feel like somehow you were too much, too intense, or too demanding. But the reality is that their disappearance has nothing to do with your worth or your effort. It's a reflection of their limitations, the emotional bandwidth they have, the boundaries they are unwilling to cross, and the level of responsibility they are capable of carrying. Understanding this distinction gives you power. It allows you to stop trying to chase someone who can't meet you where you are. It lets you redirect your energy towards someone who is excited, not just by the idea of being with you, but by the reality of showing up day after day for you. Because someone who is ready doesn't vanish when effort is required. They lean in. They choose you when the thrill fades, and they stay when consistency begins. And once you grasp that, the game changes. The fantasy will no longer trap you, and the real connection that lasts will be the only one you invest in. At first, it feels confusing. One day, they're fully present, attentive, sweet, responsive, making you feel like you finally met someone who gets you. The next day, they're distant, slow to respond, or disappear entirely. Your mind spins trying to figure out what changed, what you said or did to cause this, and why someone who seems so interested suddenly feels like a stranger. But here's the truth. Hot and cold behavior isn't confusion. It's fear. Fear is messy. It doesn't announce itself politely, and it doesn't come with an apology. It shows up as inconsistency. When someone disappears after moments of closeness, it's often not about you at all. It's about them trying to protect themselves from vulnerability. Emotional intimacy demands risk. The risk of being hurt, rejected, or judged. For someone who struggles to tolerate that risk, retreating becomes a strategy for self-preservation. Pulling back temporarily restores a sense of safety, a buffer between themselves and the intensity of connection they aren't ready to manage. Mixed signals are also about control. Relationships require surrender, compromise, and the willingness to be seen completely. That level of surrender can feel overwhelming to someone who fears losing autonomy or independence. So instead of confronting those feelings, they create distance, they disappear, they pull away, and they reappear when the intensity has dulled, giving themselves the illusion of choice and freedom while still maintaining a connection. In their mind, this is the safest way to navigate closeness. They get the emotional benefit without fully risking themselves. Expectations trigger the same response. Once someone starts counting on them, expecting consistency, clarity, or emotional investment, they feel pressure. Even if the relationship is casual or undefined, the weight of what they could be asked to give feels like a trap. Mixed signals allow them to avoid commitment without having to make a conscious decision to leave entirely. It's a way to flirt with intimacy while still keeping the door open to retreat. This is why hot and cold behavior feels personal to you. It's designed to elicit a reaction. But it's not about you. It's about their internal struggle with vulnerability, responsibility, and trust. They may genuinely like you, may even be drawn to you. But when the closeness becomes too real or too fast, their instinct is to step back. The disappearance becomes a form of emotional armor, a pause button that allows them to regain a sense of control. The painful part is that while you're waiting, analyzing, or questioning yourself, they aren't thinking about your feelings, they're managing their own fear. That doesn't make it fair, but it does make it predictable. Recognizing this dynamic is liberating because it shifts the focus back to you. Once you see that mixed signals are self-protection, you stop internalizing them as judgments on your worth and start asking yourself what you need: consistency, clarity, and emotional safety. Because someone who is ready won't oscillate. They'll stay present even when intimacy feels intense, and they won't hide behind fear at the very moment they have the chance to show up. The moment someone disappears, it's natural to panic. Your mind races, trying to figure out what went wrong, what you could have done differently, or what hidden message their silence might be sending. You scroll through conversations, overanalyze their last words, and replay every interaction like a movie in your head, hoping for a clue that will explain their absence. But here's the hard truth. The real red flag isn't that they left, it's that you stayed waiting. Waiting is a trap because it puts your power in someone else's hands. When you linger, hoping for a message, an apology, or some kind of clarity, you give them control over your emotions and your sense of self-worth. You start building your days, your hope, and your emotional energy around someone who has already made a choice about how much or how little they are willing to invest. The inconsistency becomes the measure of your happiness, and that's a place no one should ever occupy. Clarity doesn't usually arrive in dramatic moments or big revelations. It shows up through consistency. Someone who is serious about you, about a connection, about building something real, demonstrates it through their actions every single day. They don't vanish when things start to feel real. They don't leave you guessing. They don't make you wonder if you're overthinking it. Their presence is the evidence of their commitment. Silence, distance, and disappearance are equally evidence, but evidence of something very different. The power shift happens the instant you wreck. Recognize that waiting is optional. Waiting is a choice, and so is moving forward. The moment you stop chasing closure, you reclaim your agency. You stop giving someone else the ability to dictate how you feel, how you spend your energy, and how you define your worth. You begin to understand that their disappearance has already given you the answer you were seeking. They are not choosing you in the way you deserve. And once you accept that, the pull to wait, to question, to hope starts to weaken. This isn't about bitterness or resentment. It's about clarity and self-respect. The red flag isn't their absence. It's your tolerance for uncertainty. It's how long you allow someone else's indecision to influence your life. Real growth happens when you turn that energy inward, when you focus on what you can control, your choices, your boundaries, your willingness to value yourself above anyone else's inconsistency. When you stop waiting, you create space for someone who will show up consistently, someone who communicates, someone whose presence matches their words. You create space for a love that doesn't require guessing, fearing, or hoping that they'll return. And that's the ultimate lesson. The real red flag is not in their leaving, but in staying in a place that diminishes your own power. Once you walk away from waiting, you step fully into yourself, and that is where real love, real clarity, and real respect can finally find you.